Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. I'm Reed Price, and I'm happy to have you here today. We're going to be talking with Jerry Cornfield of the State's News Service. He's with the Washington State News, and we're going to find out more about what's going on in Olympia as the legislative session gets underway and a new administration takes control. I want to first, though, thank Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island, which sponsors Something to Talk About. They offer independent living, assisted living, and memory care up on Rolling Bay. So take a look, visit them, give them a call. They'd be glad to treat you to lunch or dinner at their bar and grill. Ask for Celia or Jamie when you call 206-594-1010. Fieldstonecommunities.com. Jerry, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day, and it's getting to be busier every day, I imagine, this time of year, to join us and talk a little bit about what we can expect as the legislative session gets underway. As I mentioned before we got started, we have some new players in Washington after several years with the same governor and several recurring agency heads. And I'm just curious about what you see as the sort of differences and similarities in the landscape. Obviously, one Democrat is replacing another, so there's some consistency in leadership there.
Well, I mean, the similarities are the session's going to be 105 days. Unlike similar to past years, they're going to talk about the budget. Similar to the last few years, Democrats are in control of the legislature. They have larger majorities this session than they did last session. You know, the House and Senate each added a member on the Democrat side. So Republicans are a little bit more in the minority. So, there's going to be some similar issues. There are people still concerned about affordability, public safety, transportation, education. But what's going to be, I don't know if it'll be different so much as it will be just the dynamics will be different in that we have let's see, with all the changes going on, of the 147 legislators, at least 31, and I think by the time the first week of the session rolls around, we could be up to about 33 or 34 people who are new in the House and Senate. I mean, some House members are going to the Senate. We have vacancies still to be filled as we head into the Senate. And then we have a new governor, and then we have new folks who are the public lands commissioner and the insurance commissioner. I mean, there are a lot of jobs that are being filled by new folks. So some of them know each other and they've been around, so they know how this works in the legislature. But just the dynamics of people being in new jobs in a lot of places, it's hard to predict whether that means things will go smoothly as folks kind of sit back and let it, come to them, or if everybody comes in with an agenda that they want to try to accomplish in the first 10 days rather than use up all 105 days. And then it could just get tense.
So, you having covered the activities in Olympia for some time, can you tell us a little bit about you mentioned some of the issues, but it seems to me like one of the things that's been getting a lot of attention is the fact that after a couple of sessions where the legislature has felt as though they've been able to expand programs, that there's been increased revenue. And the forecast looks for now like that's not going to be the next few years, and they're going to need to look at how to restrain some costs. Can you tell us how that came to be, and what kind of pressures that's going to put on those lawmakers?
So, I mean, it's hard to, the forecast is an interesting process, right? They're trying to guess how much, in this state, we're driven by consumer spending. So how much spending is going to go on and how much they'll collect in tax receipts. The economy of Washington's been pretty sturdy since the Great Recession. And it continues to be pretty sturdy compared to other states. And so revenues will grow by, sometimes a percentage. I think they're estimating around 2.5%, 3% this fiscal year, which is, faster than a lot of people's salaries. So the revenue is still projected to grow, and it's going to supposedly grow faster in the next couple of years. So I just want to be clear, revenue is not a problem. And voters have helped. I mean, I got to remind people that voters have helped over the last decade or so when you legalized the sale of cannabis, when you got rid of the state liquor stores. Those two items alone have generated hundreds of millions of dollars for them, and it continues to generate money. So the money is not the question. Um, Spending, as you point out, they're going to have to spend less, but essentially that means growing slower. This government has really grown in the last 12 years, and the state of Washington does a lot more for a lot more people than it did 12 years ago. And I think the challenge for the legislature and the governor is deciding, okay, what can we do in the next 2 years in terms of continuing to grow, and can we continue to grow? I mean, it's important to know that part of what the shortfall is, these numbers are all, they're guesses, but they're predictions. Most of that shortfall is a prediction of what it will take to cover the cost of everything we're already doing today, not even, or we've promised to do. And it's those promises that drive it up. And so if they just say, look, we're not going to keep all the promises. One example, changing the eligibility for some early learning programs and changing eligibility for access to childcare. If they just put off those decisions for 2 years or 3 years, several $billion of that shortfall just magically go away. No one will be kicked off childcare. Nobody will be kicked out of early learning program. It just won't be more people coming in. And I think that's what we're talking about.
I think I remember from your reporting that that there may be difficulty in expanding those programs anyway because it's hard to find the people who are uh, able to run early learning programs right now. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there are slots, if you will, that are open. The children are not in them, maybe because they don't have instructors. There's childcare eligibility. Sometimes there's not providers, so you have more demand than there are providers. So sure, you cannot, you can only serve as many people as you have the providers for those programs. So there is a challenge. It's a flip of a challenge that other parts of state government have, like finding employees, right? When we talk about public safety, how do we want more law enforcement officers, say, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle say, but you can't make people get into law enforcement. So there's money to pay them, and there'll be more money, I'm sure, in this legislative session, but you can't make people apply and to do some of those jobs. Ferry workers, I mean, there's a, they need more ferry workers because not everyone wants to work many hours of overtime, and the changes that have gone there. But you cannot just instantly create individuals who can handle all the different jobs on a state ferry. So that's the reverse of that problem.
And then the other thing is, I think you've written a little bit about um, ideas about where revenue might be increased, where taxes might be expanded. Can you say anything about what you've learned about what might be in the works?
Well, I know I won't be too affected because the biggest target is folks who have, I don't know, a lot of millions of dollars of wealth, and or they own properties that are very expensive, or they're very large businesses. I mean, there is a buffet of ideas, and we got to see some of the selections when State Senator Noel Frame put them in a PowerPoint to her colleagues in the Senate Democratic Caucus, and then proceeded to share them with every member of the Senate, which means Republicans got it, and then they shared it with us in the media. And some of the ideas aren't new. I mean, they're raising the local property, the lid, lifting the cap on local property tax, right? It's 1% now. There was a bill last year to go to 3%. We could see that again. The real estate estate tax, they might add a surcharge there for expensive properties. There's a wealth tax on people that they're looking at. And these are not written proposals yet. They'll show up as legislation potentially in the early weeks, or they might not show up at all, or they could show up in a budget when that comes out in March. So but they are looking, I think the ones that are going to get the most attention, there's two business taxes. One would be a surcharge in the business and occupation tax that could affect tens of thousands of businesses. And there's another that would be just a simple increase in the rate paid by those super large companies. I think that I want to, I may be guessing like 300 or 400 million a year in revenue. So that's, the really big corporations, and that alone could raise several $100 million. So I could see them going that rate, going that route. So it's but the other, I mean, they have some wild, I would say wild ideas, like sales tax on self-storage rental units was in this list. And then there's a talk about trying to do this employer payroll tax that's similar to Seattle, but do it statewide. But something like that will probably face legal challenges. They're more difficult to develop and deploy in 105-day session. So I'm not I'm not expecting some of those more complicated ones to go through. I won't be surprised if they do the property tax, do the real estate tax, and do the business tax.
Process will be, I know that there was some provisional, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, suggestions about what might be possible to do to close the budget hole from Governor Inslee, but obviously this will all land on Bob Ferguson's lap now, right? In terms of uh, guidance from the governor.
Yeah, well, I don't. Yeah, he's been moving around. I'm not sure if he's been able to deliver that to his lap quite yet, but maybe he'll wait till the inauguration speech on January 15th. Uh, I mean, I've been trying to figure out. I consider him one of the influential or lawmakers, if you will, to watch this session, and then I realized that after 14 months and $14 million in campaigning, I'm not sure anyone quite knows what his priorities are after that campaign. They didn't talk about controversial issues like taxes. His issue papers have been wiped off the internet, but they all promise to do everything we're doing now, but more of it. So it is going to be interesting to see where he wants to go. And for this week, for example, on January, what is that, the 8th, he's planning to spend time up with Mukilteo and Clinton with ferry workers. So one of his first events as a governor-elect is to spend time with ferry workers, but I'm not quite sure what he can do for ferry workers and what that kind of is, what he's signaling with that appearance.
You just gave a couple of dates this week, the 8th, inauguration on the 15th. Are there other key dates that we should be watching for to get clues about, sort of how the new leadership in the houses are going to go, and also with the governor?
Well, I think so the session starts noon January 13th. So whether live or on archive, you could watch. I'd be listening to the House Speaker when she makes her comments on opening day. They tend to do some more speaking. She may give some clues about, I think a lot of it's going to sound familiar, but there may be some clues there. Tuesday, the governor gives his last state of the state, and that's going to be again, midday joint session. We'll see what kind of response he gets. I think his message will just be, I'm handing the ball off. We're still going forward. I know there's budget troubles, but we're not going to go backward. Wednesday, that first speech, midday of the governor-elect Ferguson, he'll be governor then. We're all going to be wondering what kind of message and what kind of tone he'll take, if it'll sound any different than a campaign speech. But the committees start meeting on that Monday, the first day. So, those are events. And by the end of the first week, maybe the second week, we'll see just, I think we have to see what Governor Ferguson's going to do. Folks who are tuned into this realize he hasn't done a press conference since the election. He hasn't just done any kind of event where he's just sat and taken questions from any reporters who could ask, what is your position on this, that, and the other? So when he gives his first press conference, whenever that might be, I think we'll also get a little more indication of what he wants to do in his 105 days.
Do you know of any particular measures or legislative issues that you anticipate outside of the budgetary talks and the programs you've already mentioned that might be coming up by specific lawmakers who have been trying to, get support for their efforts?
Well, there's always a handful that don't make it to the finish line the year before or the last couple of years. I think we're going to see this year as a bill that will reach the governor's desk for what's fondly known as rent stabilization. Opponents call it rent control. I think a statewide cap on rent increases is what will be the goal. Where whether the figure will be, what the rules will be, I have no idea. But I think there's enough motivation this year to get that one through. I think we will see, and I'm going to jump around topic wise. I think we're going to see at least one or two more bills related to reducing gun violence. There was a bill to require a permit to purchase a weapon, and that had some rules tied to it. And there's another attempt to reduce the number of places where one can openly carry a weapon in public. So I think we'll see that. Um, there's going to be a lot of talk about education, but without a lot of money, I'm not sure they can increase funding for special education the way many members want to do that. The one issue that we get the least amount of conversation, at least till the budget, is climate. I mean, Governor Jay Inslee will be gone. There is nobody really stepping up who's going to step up to be the climate warrior. In many ways, there's a feeling that they've done so much. We just need to let some of it take hold and see where it goes. They'll be fighting about how to spend the Climate Commitment Act money. Republicans are introducing bills to try to roll back some of the provisions of some bills. So that climate, which has been sort of driven there. And then, of course, we talk about the taxes. If you want a sleeper bill or a sleeper topic to watch, they are talking about, the governor put out merging two of the state worker pension plans. And, they're both fine, but taking one and using some of their surplus to help balance get rid of the shortfall. That one's a little bit technical, but I think that one could stir some passions if it gets introduced. And then we're looking, there's going to be a bill to make evergreen, the official state motto, make Washington. And there's another bill, another try to recognize National Kimchi Day or State Kimchi Day. There's some other holidays, some state holidays being proposed. So hopefully not everything will be all about money and services. There'll be some lighthearted ones, and there'll be some reforms that'll be sought.
Great. I wonder if anybody who's on has a question or comment that they might like to pose for Jerry. I'm wondering if there are some, you mentioned that we have a number, maybe as many as 34 new folks in the offices now. 31, did you say today? But that could grow. Are there folks in that new class that we should that might be interesting to watch?
Oh, I don't, you know what? I have to be honest. I don't, there's, when you're sitting in Olympia covering the state from sort of the broad view that Washington State Standard has, I think we did more work on the congressional races. But the Senate will be kind of boring in the sense because except for two members, they're all representatives who got elected into Senate seats. But there are, a couple of new senators, completely new, and the Democrat side, and the Republicans. Well, and so they won't be quite as exciting. And the House, depending on where one is on the political spectrum, I think some folks are watching for the successor to former House Speaker Frank Chop. His name is Sean Scott. He was described as a Democratic socialist, but as a candidate, he ran as a Democrat. So we'll see. I'm not sure you can move the politics of Seattle much farther to the left than the current delegation from there, but that will be one. Marcus Riccelli, who was a representative, he's now in the Senate. He's from Spokane. He's a Democrat. He's going to be the floor leader. That's a tough job. We'll see. That will then see how he does working across the aisle and keeping things running smoothly. But in terms of new people, there's just, until I get to see them in a room, I'm not quite sure how many of them have, those without previous public service, they tend to be the ones that will be more entertaining, both with their bills, and they'll be the most human, right? They'll make mistakes, they'll say things, do things, and go down the wrong hallway, be late for something, and we won't write about it, but it just shows that there is an element of citizen legislature still in Washington, and they kind of embody that. Uh, so, uh, but yeah, those are the folks I can't name drop because I'm blank on all of the.
That's all
There's
right.
so many, and I looked through. I mean, I have to say there was one guy I did meet, David Stubbe, and he's down in the Southwest Washington, and I didn't realize. I mean, I covering it. It's like he'll be the tallest and maybe the biggest. He's the mayor of Washougal, and he's a big guy, and there's some others around the state that are coming in with issues that. There's a Representative John Lay coming in. He ran against. He opposes tolls on the I-5 Columbia Bridge, and it's a big issue. Got him elected. And there's a total plan to have tolls on the I-5 Columbia Bridge. So I look for some interesting floor comments from him as they get closer to, if they ever talk about it on the transportation budget. So they'll be there as going on.
Great. Rita, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I had a couple things. I wondered for you, Jerry, what do you think is, or what is it that you're most interested in watching this session?
Well, for me, I am interested in seeing how Bob Ferguson makes the shift from attorney to governor. I mean, when you're attorney general, you're talking about lawsuits. He filed another one today from his office. You're talking about legal matters. You're kind of limited by choice. You don't say a lot. And he did a lot on gun issues. So now he has to run all of state government. And so that's going to be one dynamic I'm watching because he did say he wanted to change the culture of state government, but even his latest appointments, he's reappointed quite a few Inslee executives. So he's not changing the face of state government. So we'll see that. I'm also there's some issues that are kind of in the weeds, but like transportation, they've been talking, and the state spent millions of dollars on this idea of a road usage charge, where we pay a fee per mile that we drive. This might be a year where they try to move ahead. They might be inspired by New York and their congestion pricing system to say, oh, let's try something really like new. So I'm watch that. The taxes will keep interested. It's in the end, it's these dynamics of the individuals, what I kind of get lost in, how they're getting the deal making that's going to go on, and I would look to see if Republicans, the votes the last couple of years in the Senate, Republicans have voted for the budget. They didn't like everything in it, but they liked being a part of the process. I think they'll still be a part of the process, but if there are tax measures in there, they may have to respectfully vote no again, and then we'll just have a divided government, and it'll just split that way.
The other thing that I wanted to ask about was the funding for special ed, and that's part of the umbrella of the whole education department, or is that carved out as a special?
It's they actually set the formula into the state budget, and then they put dollar amounts there, so that they will, if they want more money provided to school districts for special education services, they can put more money in the state budget for that. And then they've dealt with issues about percentages and multipliers, and for districts, and it's way too technical. But the bottom line is local school districts say they're short millions of dollars of what they need. I mean, there may be ways. I mean, there are some creative areas where they could cut or change or transfer dollars.
Okay, thank you so much.
I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit about I know that you've worked in traditional news organizations for a long time. You're now working for a nonprofit. in Olympia. Can you tell us a little bit about the Washington State Standard and sort of how we would find you to follow your coverage? I know that one of the things I discovered was that a lot of other papers pick up your reporting and put it in their under their banner.
Yeah, we're kind of the opposite of what the demise of for-profit newspapers has been the information being taken and used for free by others. We're kind of like, take our information and use it for free. But it's an interesting organization. States Newsroom is the sort of the umbrella group. They're based in the East Coast. The founders about 5 years ago launched it. And now there are bureaus like ours in 33 states, and including Oregon, Idaho, Montana. So, and the idea is to increase the amount of coverage of state government. And we do that under a what's called a Creative Commons license, which means that anybody can use it. Anyone can reproduce and run our stories, preferably not edited, and the photos that are associated with the stories, and they can use it for free as long as they give us credit and say, use our byline, identify who we are as the organization. So, and the concept was there's news deserts out there, and I don't know if it's a news desert in Olympia as much as there's newspapers that don't have staff, but they want to cover state government. No one, so few people are now paying Associated Press anymore. Most of them have dropped AP as a source of information, and the Associated Press doesn't have any reporters in Olympia anymore. So we've filled that void, and we have we have a four-person team during the session, which makes us the largest organization staff-wise focused on what's happening in Olympia this session. Our website is free, WashingtonStateStandard.com. We did not go with any initials. Gosh forbid, we would make it easy. So you have to remember the whole thing. Emails too. And no, our organization has a bureau in Washington, D.C. And so they're covering Congress. And although these other newspapers that run my story, they could also run our Washington, D.C. stories if they wanted. And so it gives, we've kind of merged from starting off as kind of a newsletter on a website with some news to now a newsletter to an online news go-to site, because we have stories up on what's happening in DC today, the certification of the election results. We'll have coverage from the National Cathedral for the national funeral of President Carter. So we will cover national events, and it'll be available for folks. So we have subscribers to our newsletter. Again, subscribe for free. We go to the website, and I think we're just trying to get as much coverage out there on issues. We don't have, I can tell you from all these years, you don't have as much interaction with readers as you would a local newspaper, right? I walk down the street, but nobody necessarily knows me the way it was when I worked for the Herald in Snohomish County. So that's something maybe over time will change. But like I say, you'll see my bylines and my colleagues' bylines and other outlets. I would encourage folks to just, if you're reading it in one paper, just keep it, encourage that paper to keep using it. It doesn't cost them anything, and maybe they'll give us feedback on what's hot and what's not.
Now, and because it's a nonprofit, you're expecting some support from donors. Is that sort of?
I'm supposed to leave it to my boss. I'd love to make a pitch, but no, whenever I run into a billionaire, I just ask them for a small donation, maybe their
There you
pocket.
go.
But
that's what it is, right? It's a nonprofit organization.
Yes, it is a nonprofit. Contributions are welcomed and appreciated. We don't do a heavy pitch if folks were signed up to our newsletter, unlike some news outlets where they probably got a email, and some are getting 2 or 3 a day in the last few days of the year, trying to get people to make a nice donation for a tax write-off. We don't chase folks that way. We might one day if things get tough right now. the creators have foundations, and they have a solid donor base that has been able to allow us to be treated
Agree.
nice.
And I do think that it's interesting how much when we've seen a lot of the um, older news organizations have to shrink staffs, and like you said, the AP is not staffing places they used to staff. There's just a lot of tumult in the way that news is gathered and shared, and it's good to see people who have the expertise to do the work you're doing able to inform us. I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, I used to work for Sound Publishing, which owned the Bainbridge paper, the weekly, and now I think Carpenter Media bought it. I don't know what the status of the paper and the staff, but it was tough when Sound Publishing bought some of these weeklies, and there was some reductions. And I know there's been reductions further since Carpenter bought it, and that's really, I mean, I'm an old guy in this business, and I tend to argue that the biggest concern should not be we need more Seattle Times size papers. We need more in the community, because the community really doesn't know what's going on if there's nothing being written. So we'll tell you
True
what's
enough.
going on in Olympia, but we won't tell you about that Bainbridge City Council meeting, sadly.
That's right. That's right. But it is good to have somebody covering what's going on in Olympia, because that's also not the most, not always, occasionally it is, but not always the most read article in the paper. Um, okay, well, Jerry, I really appreciate you taking the time to update us, and we will be following you at the Washington State Standard, and also probably in some other papers as well.
Well, I thank you very much for letting me be on today. And I mean, obviously during the session, you or anybody who's watching, my email is on that on the stories, and you can find me there. I'm always welcome to start a dialogue or try to provide information. That is the other thing. We do try to connect people with what they need if they call up or email.
Thank you. Okay. Have a good afternoon, and a productive, interesting, and occasionally lighthearted session ahead.
Thank you.